All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Dr. Melody and Paula, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're coming in from too. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I'm Lindsay Johnson. Welcome. I am the founder and CEO at FitPros, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time thinking about what actually supports people. So, not just at work, but in our actual lives, in our real lives. And one thing that has become incredibly clear is that well-being is not just one thing. It's not just mental health. It's not just your physical exercise health. It's not just your finances. It is everything. Because when life doesn't pause when we're at work, and work doesn't pause when we're at home these days. So that's truly the what's behind today's conversation. So whole person, whole life. And at FitPros, our role is to build the foundation. So we bring consistent, accessible wellness to support a wide range of needs across an employee population. So then we take that step to partner with companies like the two experts today that go deeper in critical areas like behavioral health and financial well-being. So today's conversation is no slides, no selling. We're just going to have some real talk, and with the goal, our true goal is to talk about what's actually helping people. That makes us feel better. How can we work better? How can we just live better? Be better human beings, be kind, all of that good stuff. You are so encouraged to chat and comment. We all want to feel better. Absolutely. You're encouraged to comment throughout in the chat box. That just brings that community, that belonging. So drop stuff in the chat. Keep it coming. If you have a personal, private question, go ahead and direct message us, and we'll get to that as soon as we can. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce Paula Allen. Paula is the global leader of VP of Research, Insights, and Strategic Communications at TELUS Health, where she focuses on workplace mental health and overall employee well-being. Through TELUS Health, Paula brings insight into the everyday challenges employees are navigating, from stress and burnout to more complex mental health needs. So she helps organizations better understand what employees are experiencing and what actually supports them in a meaningful and practical way. Thank you, Paula, for joining us. And I'll also introduce Dr. Melody Wright. Dr. Wright is a financial wellness consultant at BrightPlan and an accredited financial counselor with over a decade of experience helping employees build healthier, more sustainable relationships with their money. Financial well-being is one of the most common stressors, but we talk about it the least. But it does drive your stress, and Melody brings that practical, approachable lens to help people navigate all of it. She works very closely with organizations and individuals to turn financial stress into something people can understand and manage and take on. So thank you both so much for being here. I'm going to try to be quiet for a lot of this because you two are the phenomenal experts. Let's jump right in, and I'm going to go back and forth with some questions here. But again, you all chime in with questions that you have, burning desires, all of that stuff. Bring it, because that's what we're here for. So I'm going to start with Dr. Wright. You ready for this? Okay.
I
Get ready for the button. When employees say they are stressed, how often does money quietly play a role? And why is it so stinking hard for all of us to talk about money? Why does it feel awkward and icky?
Well, Lindsay, I'm going to tell you, because you said money quietly plays a role, and I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you, money is probably the loudest voice in the room when people
Mhm.
are just dealing with day-to-day things. And what we
Mhm.
know is that 60% of employees have cited financial stress as their number one stressor. We know that financial stress is one of the biggest barriers to financial wellness. And what we have to remember is that from day to day, money is a thread that runs through almost every single decision that we make. Where do
Mhm.
we send our kids to school? Where do we shop for groceries? What type of car do we buy? What subscription services do we sign up for? What medical services do we want to be able to have, right? And so when you think about money being one of the loudest voices in the room, it's going to be saying a lot of different things to you, and how you feel inside, how you internalize that financial stress is going to be based on your upbringing, our lived experiences, our experiences, even good or bad with money. Maybe we had some trauma with money, and that's going to determine whether a financial situation can feel okay for us or it can maybe feel stressful. And we also have to remember the world is rapidly changing. I feel like you go to sleep and wake up, and then there is something new that you have to deal with. And so the comforts and the things that we once deemed reliable are no longer giving us comfort, or they're being taken away. And so a lot of people are having to adjust, which is why they're feeling a lot of the financial stress that they're feeling now. And one of the reasons why it's so hard for people to talk about money is because money is very personal. This is why it's called personal finance, because money is going to be personal to each and every individual. And for some people, depending on where they are with their finances, money can still carry a lot of shame or fear of judgment, which is why people don't want to talk about it. So instead of like going to seek help or asking people to maybe support them through whatever they're dealing with, they try to resolve these issues on their own, or they suffer in silence. And unfortunately, when they make those choices, this can lead to exacerbating that financial stress that they're already feeling even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The couple things like really resonate. You said trauma with money, and I was like, dang, okay. Like those certain trigger words that you had expressed there, I was like, you are absolutely right. I hadn't really thought about people's lived experiences truly resonate with that. And Paula, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would just agree with everything that Dr. Wright said very strongly, and just the relationship in terms of overall well-being. We've been doing a longitudinal study, a global study for a number of years, and what we find in different cultures as well is
Mhm.
that the connection between mental well-being and financial well-being is extraordinarily strong, and in particular the aspect of financial well-being that has to do with emergency savings, so whether you
Mhm.
have them or not. And when you think about it, it's a very scary thing to go through life without a safety net. And your financial safety net is something that really does impact your sense of safety, generally speaking, whether you're thinking about it 24/7, as many people are, or even if it's in the background. And it's not correlated with income, because we have people who have that deep financial strain and low emergency savings and high income, and we see the same impact on their well-being as people with more modest income.
Mhm. Couldn't agree with you more. It's how we show up. It does it. If we don't feel that security net, then we're not going to show up as our whole self in life or in work. So that's great. Thank you for that addition. So I have this question at you, Paula. What happens to our minds and our bodies when we are constantly trying to optimize instead of stabilize our well-being? So this is something I get stuck so deep in because I'm like a multitasker. I'm like, I think that I'm getting so much done, but I'm not sure, right? Like sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So tell us more about that.
I'm glad that you put together mind and body, because they're not as distinct as many
Yeah.
people think. And one of the things that really has impacted me is actually seeing a brain change when it doesn't get what it needs, when it's under strain that's unrelenting, when it doesn't have the nutrients that it needs. Like
Mhm.
we cannot have optimum well-being if we don't take care of ourselves in totality, including our brain. And it's very sensitive, way more sensitive than your little finger. So when you think about it, there's a base that requires investment in our health,
Mhm.
our sleep. We know that sleep deprivation, if it's ongoing, it's really indistinguishable from depression, and at its extreme, it's indistinguishable in how you show up from psychosis.
Mhm.
When we eat, we give our brains what we need or we don't, right? So when we don't have the nutrients, I've seen people who had very low iron or other minerals, and again, it shows up as depression and or anxiety. You can't focus in the way that you would hope. So you label it as what you think it is when it's actually very physical.
Mhm.
We know that movement is important. We know that your response to stress is important. You can respond to anger in a way that really destroys you and
Mhm.
physically, Or you can take that anger and you can say, well, this is because I'm frustrated about something. And then you take steps to do something about it, which puts you in a different place. So all of those health things are important. So how you respond to stress, you might get help from counseling. How you respond in any of them, you might get help. But the next level that would move you from the first thing that you said, which is, I think you said stabilize. And the way I'm sort of thinking about that is you're already at optimum well-being and you just want to stay there, which is what we have to focus on doing on an ongoing basis, because you don't get healthy and you don't have good well-being in February and then do nothing and expect to have good well-being in June. Like, it just doesn't work that way. It's an ongoing thing. And the opposite, which is striving to get there. So you have the base, which is the physical health, but our experiences are hugely important as well. So I won't go into the financial because we spoke about that, and Dr. Wright is the expert, but we have other things too. We need a sense of purpose and accomplishment. We can get that from work, we can get that from church, we can get that from a number of different places. But if you are not sure that that's important, observe somebody who is retired and then they do nothing and they don't have any reason to wake up in the morning. They don't have anybody to depend on them. It's quite sad, right?
Yeah.
We also need to feel a sense of love and belonging and connectedness to others. And if we don't, our physical health actually changes. More likely to have cardiovascular issues, more likely to get sick, through infection. It literally physically changes us because our bodies are so tense because we're not getting what we need, that your cells can't do what they're supposed to do. And then the other thing that we need is play. We need that it's not just for kids. Like, we need something to take us out of our daily routine. We need something that gives us a smile on our face, where we can try out a new persona even, and it's safe. We can think in a different way. And I'll tell you, one of the things that every single culture has as that safety valve for stress, every single culture, is dance.
Oh,
And that, again, research said, opens up your brain, allows you to learn, gets rid of strain, connects you to other people. If you're not able to dance or don't like dancing, I'm not going to force it down your throat. I'm just giving you an idea. But you have to have some variety in life that takes you out of just your day-to-day responsibilities. That's as important to health as anything else.
Oh my gosh, you just loaded on so much there. I'm like taking notes here too. Wow. The last thing that you said with dance, one of the things that broke me open when I first got into meditation and yoga was ecstatic dance. So that type of dance that you just get goofy in a room by yourself and dance. I was, by the end of this meditation, I was on the ground crying in a ball because it's just so expressive. And so, but I think people can do that in so many different ways, whether it's art or whether it's, when we first hopped on today, we were talking about that release, and Paula mentioned something about picking up a PowerPoint presentation and just like refining it. And that's something that relieves her. So thank you for that. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention was the nutrients. You mentioned that early on, is like the base of investing in ourselves. And a lifetime ago, I was a fitness competitor. And so I would really focus on the nutrients that I would put in my body to build certain muscle groups. And I never felt better. My skin was clean, all that stuff. I'm in a roller coaster of life, as many of us do go through. And so this conversation is helping me remember that baseline of things that we can do, these small little changes. And so I would love to shift it back to Dr. Wright, and sticking on this topic for just another moment. So how does our finance play into all of that, right? Like, because Paula just laid out a spread of things, and so if you want to come off mute, Dr. Wright, how do you think finances play into that?
I think finances plays a big role into a lot of that. I mean, when you think about how we optimize instead of stabilize, right? I think when we think about finances, we're always trying to get it right And I think for a lot of times it becomes a cycle where we're constantly trying to optimize, but we can't get to a point where we're fully stabilized because we haven't truly realized what works for our own self. We're trying to follow someone else's set of rules. Well, so and so said do it this way. Well, I heard so and so say do it that way. And again, I'm going to come back and say personal finance is personal. So you really have to understand what is going to work for you. I may use a dashboard to do my budget, and you may tell me that budgets don't work for me. So instead of you doing a budget, maybe you need to do a spending plan or maybe do a reverse budget or something different. Again, it needs to align with with your personality, your style, your spending style. And also one of the things that I like to add is when we think about building financial wellness, a lot of the times I like to guide people into being proactive instead of being reactive. And when you're being proactive, you're thinking about things that might come up. You're thinking about those expenses that you have coming down the line. You're thinking about that saving, building up that emergency fund or that life happens fund so that when an emergency or a situation does happen, you have something to fall back on instead of it happening and you're scrambling to try to figure out, well, what should I do? Because then you're not going to be stable anymore. So that's when I think about optimization instead of stabilization, being proactive instead of reactive, and you're just really finding the rhythm that works for you when it comes to managing your money.
I love that. And when you said proactive versus reactive, it just reminded me like when we're designing FitPros content calendar in our live platform, we have the baseline of thinking about preventative health. What is going to prevent people in general from getting sick? How can we support them with that preventative, proactive sort of like things to put in their minds? So one of the things that I try to always fall back on are habits. And so, you know, in life pulls us in and pulls us out. So habits can be difficult to stick with. And so taking this back to Paula, how do we stick with habits when we're really overwhelmed and life is just chaotic?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer in two parts.
Okay.
The first is that small C commitment beats
Mm.
big M motivation every day of the week. Like if you have a habit that you want to follow, number one, try not to make it too far from what you're doing right now. So if I don't go for walks and I don't go to the gym, I'm not going to start off with in my mind running the marathon. That might be something in terms like of a long-term goal, but what I do right now is my commitment to do X, to start to walk every day, to start to, just that 1% difference every single day compounds, or every single quarter compounds upon itself tremendously. And we often talk a lot about motivation, and there's all sorts of books and things about motivation, but at the end of the day, it really is a bit of a distraction. If you want to do something, that's it. If you don't feel motivated to do it at this particular moment or whenever, then you're human. It doesn't mean that you can't have a commitment to yourself and just go forward to it. I am one of those people, I don't know if I'm rare, who does not find brushing my teeth all that fun, but I do it multiple times a day because I know it's good for me. It's part of my routine. I do not think about it. So we want to sort of build in, not too much so we feel like we're going to be failures, not too much even attention, just commitment. And then you're able to sort of, as a second part, maybe look back on where you've done. You've been consistent in doing whatever activity or taking whatever action that you want 90% of the time, 80% of the time. Pat yourself on the back. It could be just a mental moment. It could be, something that you want to do that is exciting, and playful, linking it to the other conversation. And then you say, yeah, now is my time to do it because I want to reward myself. But again, the main thing is strive for that 1% every couple of months. Make sure that you put a commitment into your mind as opposed to feeling you have to be motivated to do things. And then what you set your target on will become a habit much more easily.
Hmm. I definitely find myself in that position of like I'm gonna accomplish this next big thing, and it's just so hard to bite size it down. But when I have a walking treadmill here, and that even when I just walk for 10 minutes on this walking, and then I'm like, oh, I could go a little bit longer. I can go a little bit longer, right? So just say I'm gonna just put my tennis shoes on and do 10 minutes, and then things just happen to flow. So love that. Thank you. So let's talk about habits with money. So how do we get into a habit of being more intentional with money, perhaps having a better relationship with money? What does that if I feel awkward, like we started this conversation out with money, I feel awkward talking about it. I'm like very like, yeah, I have a trauma around it. So how can I start getting
Mhm.
comfortable with it?
One of the best ways to get comfortable around money, talking about money, dealing with money, is to truly just change how you talk about money to yourself. Change the labels that you are giving yourself when it comes to money. So, for instance, I like to tell people that they are the first person to hear the words that come out of their mouth, and they are the first person to hear the words that they think. We hear those words. So, when you are telling yourself, I am not good with money, you are going to believe that. When you are telling yourself that I am an impulse spender, you are going to believe that. And so, what you're going to have to do is change the things that you are saying to yourself about money. I'm not saying that none of that is true. You might be saying, well, Dr. Wright, it's true. I am an impulse spender, or I've been bad with money all my life. So I am bad with money. So, those things might be true, but that is your present. What
Hmm.
is your future? What do you want your future to be? So, if you're bad with money today, you could do something that I call flipping the script, literally. So, flipping what you are saying. So instead of saying, I am bad with money, you can say, I do not do well with money now, but I know with the right support, I can achieve financial wellness. Or I'm an impulse spender, but by putting these different practices in place, and you can list out what those practices are, I'm going to be able to spend with more intention. So it's just by
Hmm.
tweaking that script just a little bit and acknowledge where you are, but then also talk about where you want to be. And that is going to
Hmm.
be one of the biggest shifts that you can make in your relationship with money. It's going to allow you to approach money with a better, more positive mindset. And you're not going to feel that shame or judgment that you had about with money previously, because you know that now you're working with money from a position of power. You're no longer a victim, you are a victor when it comes to money.
Yeah, I just
Hmm.
want to add on that because it's a very powerful concept that fits in a number of different areas. For sure, for sure, for sure, money. But you know, the loudest voice in your whole life is the one that is in your head, right?
Hmm.
Like that is what shapes you. And the best thing about that is that you can shape it. There is you know, there is a concept around, it's very, very powerful, called self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you label yourself in a certain way, you will act in that way. Just there's you can't actually really avoid it. It is just so powerful, and and it's, you can take it in a different way as well. And just that whole idea of who I am is more important than what I will get. Because a lot of people talk about manifesting, right? And there's a lot of power, but there's a lot of weakness in manifesting because it's passive. I will just think of something and it will happen. But what Dr. Wright very rightly said is, if you think of how you think of yourself, I am a person who can, will. That is a very different thing. That is much more active. So just wanted to reinforce that point because it's so important.
Hmm. I love that. That's beautiful. And it just takes me back to if you're familiar with Kundalini yoga, one of the traditions is saying Sat Nam, and that means who I am. And so, when you said that, it felt so powerful to me. It's like repeating something to ourselves and acknowledging. And I mean, you hear like the talk nice to yourself in the mirror. And so I think that's probably one of the most powerful things that from this session that I'm going to take away, Dr. Wright, was that it truly bleeds into everything of who we are and what we do. And so the way that we think is the way that we be. That's the way that we present ourselves with others and the way that we show up to work and in everything that we do. So whether it's our mental health, our physical health, our financial health, the way that we are with ourselves is how we're going to show up to those things. So, um, so incredibly powerful. Thank you so very much. So, final notes here. Anything? Yeah, I do not know how this 30 minutes flew by so fast. We're gonna have to do this again and pick up because this conversation, I feel so moved and like I have this like little warm spot inside me. I want to go dance right now. I want to go play. I want to have some fun. And I want to go talk nice to myself in that mirror because you guys just completely motivated me. So, what are some final nuggets that you want to leave people with today? So we'll start. Let's start with you, Paula. Can you share some final words?
Yeah, I'm going to share what actually keeps me,
Mm.
focused on the topics that we're talking about. And I mentioned at the beginning about I look at self-care and well-being and the experiences that I mentioned, work, love, love, play. All of that has actually taken care of my brain. And
Mm.
it hits me very differently than taking care of emotion or taking care of well-being. And so there is nothing without your brain. There's no experience in life.
Mhm.
There's no functional movement. There is no relationships. There is no nothing. And everything that we're talking about, including that sense of accomplishment and safety when you actually properly are able to organize your finances, that is taken care of my brain. So that put the whole conversation for me in a very different priority. So I just share that in case it
Mm.
works for other people as well.
So much. All right, Dr.
Yeah.
Wright, over to you.
And I'll share that when we think about just wellness overall, one thing that I want to say is that financial stress is a silent stressor. Okay. It's not always noticeable, and we're all going to experience financial stress in many different ways. One person may experience financial stress and they can show up as an overworker. And it's not because they are committed to the job. It's because
Mhm.
they are focused on if I say no to taking on this other task, or if I say no to working overtime, it might jeopardize my job. So they're afraid of losing their
Mm.
livelihood. Financial stress can show up to somebody else as, and somebody else is they're being distracted. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they're spending more energy trying to solve that financial problem that's happening in the background of their life that they can't focus on their work. It can also show up as burnout, insomnia, anxiety, hypertension, depression, isolation, so many different things. So if you are experiencing financial stress, one of the things that I want you to do is just to recognize how it is showing up in your body, stop, and then drop that down because you want to take note of that. And then I also want you to take the time to write out what it is about your finances that is causing you to have those stressors, and then work with your employer through their benefits, whatever benefits that you have available to you. Maybe work with a financial wellness coach, a trusted friend, to try to put in things in place to help you solve those financial stressors. Because again, financial stress can show up in so many different ways, and it can impact your overall health, not just your financial health. And we want to make
Mhm.
sure that you are paying attention to that. So that's something that I really want to bring forward here. It's financial stress can show up in a lot of different ways. Make sure that
Mhm.
you are taking note of how it's showing up, and then work with a trusted individual, tap into your benefits such as your EFP, FitPros, whatever you have available to you to help you to try to resolve that so that you can get back to being your best self.
Mm. Love it. Lots of homework out there, everyone. So the underlying thread here is that well-being is in everything. It is in our brains. It is in the way we play. It is in our financial well-being and the way we move our bodies. So well-being is genuinely the foundation of everything that we do. So it's very holistic. You can't just have one thing and be okay. So really think about well-being in that lens as you're going forward. And one acronym that I like to say is called HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So when I'm feeling imbalanced, I stop and I ask myself this question: Am I feeling hungry? Do I need to fill my body with nutrients? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Am I feeling mentally overwhelmed? Do I need to get enough sleep? All of that. So it's all tied together. So leaving you all with these closing notes. One thing I always say is that every employee, every person, Dr. Wright, Paula, myself, we're all going through something. Sometimes it's very similar, sometimes it's incredibly different. So, how can we be kind to one another, meet each other where they are, take a deep breath, and just live life to be a good human being? So, I really appreciate all of you for showing up for yourselves today, for each other. Awesome conversation, far too short. We have to do this a little bit longer next time, ladies. So, thank you both for being here. Sat Nam, and have a beautiful rest of your day.